morning, everyone. Thank you for attending the Small Business Committee meeting of the Town of Montgomery IDA. My name is Connor Eckert, Executive Director. I'm here with Board Member Matthew Stoddard, Donald Berger, and Bob Santo over the phone, as well as our agency counsel, Bob McLaughlin. So let's jump right in. We had our committee meeting last week where we set some basic guidelines. We really kind of laid the groundwork, but now I think we're in a good place where we can start to think about moving forward. So right away, the application, which I provided in your packets. It's in its main form pretty much the same. If you go to the last page, I have additional questions that we agreed upon adding. I'm waiting on the volume 8 people to add those to the application itself on the website. But it is going to ask questions about history, what specifically the business does in the town of Montgomery, and also financial viability, which is something that we discussed. So the question is, are you financially viable, yes or no? And then you have to provide additional documents. So I've been working with Nugent Hauser to see if they can help us in any way, and they've agreed, in principle, that they would consult us. So they're going to let us know what documents we should be requesting to determine financial viability and how many years back. And from there, they will kind of consult us and help us make these determinations of financial liability. So application is generally the same, just adding the questions that we already determined were. So parameters, we just want to follow up on what we discussed last week. We will reimburse, but there needs to be receipts, and it needs to, to show the proof that they purchased it after the disaster declaration. So that remains the same. And of course, as per the statute, the grants that we're offering are limited to PPE and fixtures to limit the spread of COVID-19. And we have capped that off at $200,000 in total. Good. Any questions on parameters? Or we still just where we're at?
A couple of things. On this grant application form here, I just want to clarify. On the first one, it says here, the Town of Montgomery IDA cannot consider assistance for PPE purchased prior to the funding recipient's written acceptance.
Prior to cannot offer. And Bob, in the grant application, it says the IDA cannot consider assistance for PPE purchased prior to the funding recipient's written acceptance of an offer from the Town of Montgomery IDA. This means once they submit an application to us and we agree to fund them or give them a grant, they can't ask for additional monies after we've awarded them, Bob?
I think that wording says that you can't reimburse them, so that would have to be changed, that you're allowing them to be reimbursed for PPE purchased after the governor signed, or as of the date the governor signed the legislation. As we talked about last week, I think there's a risk because the legislation wasn't even proposed to go back to the date of the emergency declaration for reimbursement.
So we can go back, but no further than when the governor signed the executive order, correct?
I think that's justifiable and defensible. I think if you go beyond or past June 17th, which I think was the date that we talked about last week, I think there's a risk or criticism and a risk that the ABO is going to look for those monies to be repaid by an entity or a person. I would recommend don't yes, June 17th.
Okay, I guess, Bob, I'm a little confused by it because, again, on June 26th at the webinar that we attended, Jeff Perlman did state that we could go back. So I'm a little confused by it, that's all, whether, and basically what he said, it was up to the IDA board themselves to make that determination. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're giving us the June 17th as that date, and that would be the safest date we could use.
So, again, I saw Jeff's statement. Again, he leaves it to the business judgment of the agency. I do think that he says that in a way that he could be set you up for criticism in the future, but that's my personal belief of how he operates the UBO. I do not believe that there is any credible criticism that could be leveled at the IDA if you use June 17th as a control date. If you use the date of the declaration, which was March 11th, through June 17th, I think there's a risk of criticism because there's nothing in the legislation that says you can, there's nothing in the legislation that says you can't. But there was no legislation, there was no draft of a legislation on March 11th. If the agency wants to use the introduction date of April 13th, I think that's the right date, but I can confirm that, when the bill was first introduced by the legislature and discussed with the governor's office. That's also incredible date to use, but again, I think there's a risk because between April 13 and June 17, there was no bill. If you want to go back to the date of June 5, when it was delivered to the governor, I think, that's also a better date, because, the legislature had acted, the bill was delivered to the governor, there was nothing that indicated the governor would not sign, and so I think that's another date that has credibility and is defensible. But as you go further back for reimbursements, I just point out as a lawyer for the agency that there is a risk of criticism and a risk of clawback. And so, at June 17th, I don't believe there is a risk. At June 5th, there's a risk, but it's probably less. Back in April, there's a greater risk, and if you go back to March 11th, I just don't know how that's defensible.
So Bob, you're correct. Perlman did, I kind of wrote it down. He said the law is silent on from March 11th to June 17th. So I would agree what council recommends. That's what we vote with, and that would be June 17th.
Absolutely. June 17th, let's mitigate the risk and make it June 17th. Okay, so reimbursement, June 17th is our date.
Right.
Okay. You good with the reimbursement?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, any other parameter discussion? We know we're going 200K, 17th for reimbursement. We need receipts. We are exclusively doing grants.
Getting down to the PPE, the list of PPE, I thought we had talked about cleaning services as far as sanitizing. I don't see it listed here unless I'm missing it. Are we going to be able to do that?
Well, in that specific, the application, it's include but not limited to. So I think that it's admissible for us to include cleaning services. That's a decision that the committee or
Board has to make.
Yeah.
Okay.
remember our last meeting discussion, it was, within the realm of possibility.
Right.
But it depends on, we can only give up to an X amount. I mean, cleaning services, I doubt, like for a small business, is gonna be
Mhm.
$10,000.
Right, yeah.
Just consideration. Okay. So we good on the parameters?
I'm good.
Good.
So viability, we'll jump into. That was a discussion that we had for a while last meeting, and it's very vague. So that's why we've at least preliminarily engaged Nugent Hauser, the local firm, accounting firm, to consult us on this.
Okay.
And they said they are able to do it, but because they audit us, they're only going to offer consulting services. So they're going to let us know what financial information we would need, and in essence, they would need to really see financial viability. And once again, I'm speaking with them today. And they're also going to provide us with a scoring system to determine this viability. And they said it's fairly simple, that they model off a school board model, because many of the boards don't have finance or accounting background board members. So it's essentially, and then the way they described it was, does your company make a profit? That's one point. Does your company pay its taxes? That's another point. And once you meet a certain threshold, that determines your viability. If you don't meet that threshold of points, then you are not viable.
But non-for-profit does still fall in, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They can follow the same guidelines. And once again, they said it's fairly simple, just because non-accounting and finance people use this model. But if we do have questions or concerns, they would be happy to help us with the first view. But they said after the first view, we should be able to, we'll have a handle on it.
How soon do you think they could have something like that together?
Yeah, I pushed them. They said that they're bringing in the guy, one person to do it today, and hopefully by our board meeting they could have the matrix done and the documents that we need. So I'm going to talk to them today, but as quickly as possible.
So we pretty much need it for next week's meeting.
It'd be nice if you had it.
Yeah, and I think we will. We had a productive conversation, so I'll push them. So okay, viability will work with Nugent Hauser. And then we also have that RFI. So the RFI is a good practice for when we are trying to suggest using local businesses. But it also, to play devil's advocate, might be an unnecessary burden, an extra step in this process for a grant that's not a significant amount of money anyway. So speaking with Bob, it is possible we can put a stipulation in the program rules where local businesses should be used to purchase the PPE and fixtures with grant money, and local, I guess, defined as within the region. But that's just an option to put on the table for you guys to.
The RFI has become a little bit more complex because I think of the availability of a lot of this PPP within our town and our region. Connor, me and you have looked into it a little bit, and we find that it's all over the states. I think, if anything, at the minimum, it has to be U.S. products.
Okay.
I mean, we have a definite thing. It's town, county, region, state, U.S.
Okay.
Would that be something that we could?
Yeah, I wouldn't, and it's, once again, it's not a decision, but I wouldn't want to put another obstacle, for a business to get the whole thing. So I think that's fair. I mean, Bob, do you think it's, I mean, and I know we spoke before, putting in the program guidelines, it has to be made in the United States, or purchased from a United States company?
I think that's fair and entirely consistent with the state's current view on procurements, which is to essentially buy American. I think there's a lot of companies that are offering PPE in New York State. Much of it is not produced in the U.S. wasn't, it may now be produced in the U.S. And many of it, much of it is not produced in New York State. There's some, but certainly the requirement that it must be produced in New York State, in the U.S. is consistent with what the state requires of other permits.
That, I think it,
And it doesn't handcuff anybody.
exactly, because we wouldn't want to do that. But, so we have our application updated, have our parameters set with the reimbursement date at 17,200K just for grants. Nugent Hauser's in all likelihood going to consult with us and provide us this matrix as soon as possible. We will, in the program rules, suggest that, you know, companies use products made in the United States.
Okay. So as far as getting this message out, we discussed that a little bit. We talked last week about getting it on the website and perhaps the village websites. I was wondering if it made sense to at least some of the applicants we received from Tom Strong, that we actually physically mail this information to small businesses. Can we get that aggressive, or do we have to do a website or an advertising type thing?
So if we just picking certain people, and my question would be on that, is, does it almost look like favoritism? Not that, because we talked about this with the Tom Strong people. I mean, we already had these people in mind, so they should know about this, but how do we do it so that we're not?
Right. So, there must be a list somewhere within the town structure of small businesses that qualify for this, that perhaps you just mail out a flyer to everyone. Giving them the ability, I don't know if we want to go that route, but to be fair, my concerns, Matt, is that if it goes to a website, it's
Not
limiting
everybody's
people.
gonna see it, and I agree with you, Is there another way that, can we do website, which you said, and what was the other one?
The village websites.
The village website, all three
Yeah,
villages, right?
and I think even beyond that, I could reach out to the Orange County Chamber of Commerce. I could reach out to the Orange County Office of Economic Development.
Now,
Facebook
how,
pages.
quick question though, how did we get it all out to Tom Strong? What did we do to get that all, and plus we hit you guys, I know you personally hit the streets.
Yeah, I hit the streets, I took care of the village of Montgomery, and I think there were other people that hit Walden.
That's
I
right.
also hit Maywood, but I think more importantly, during Brian's sessions each morning, he would make mention of it quite a bit.
And I'm sure this
That's
is
a good one too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if, is he still doing that?
He does his daily updates. Yeah. Not
I think
COVID.
it's moved to weekly.
Yeah.
It's a weekly thing now?
You
He's
have
doing
to-
updates
You have to confirm
some
with
capacity,
him.
yeah.
He did change. Yeah, I'm not sure of the schedule of it anymore. It was daily. It may have moved to be a little more.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not against what you said, I just don't want there to be any legal.
Yeah.
And what if we can, you know, post the application of the information like in a public space in the villages? I mean,
We could, you know, each village hall we could post something, I could do that, I could run to each village hall and get that taken care of, and, perhaps, some of these businesses on our main streets can post them in their businesses, maybe.
We went to the Walkville Times too, didn't we, on Tom Strong?
Smart.
We did do that, yes. Bob, can we do that through the IDA, advertise it through the, local paper?
I was going to suggest that. I think that, you know, as long as the board approves that as a cost, I think that's, you know, a way to do it. My only concern with local papers is that, you know, I question in 2020 their actual circulation.
Yes.
And I think your local paper has a payment requirement to view it online. And a lot of people don't bother with that. So, you know, it's an option, I just don't know what it's worth.
Okay, what I can do is, if the board approves it next Tuesday, I could reach out to Walker Valley Times. I have some contacts there through their own website where, I think more people, I think you're probably right, Bob, more people read it online and they actually get the paper copy. But if we decide to move in that direction, I think that might be a great idea, Matt. I think it's important.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a nominal cost given the potential bang for the buck.
Yeah.
With the number of impressions that you could reach. Matt mentioned earlier, or Don, I'm not sure if you did, the mailing to the Tom Strong.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to do that, then you mail to everyone that's applied or no one that's applied. Because there's a risk that
Then it goes to everybody
you're picking
that
favorites.
applies.
I think one of you,
Also-
I think one of you said that.
Don said that, and it's a good idea.
Yeah.
That as long as there's no legal, problem with it, that is, because we know they're all businesses that are
But
looking
you
for
can't
help.
Right, you can't pick and choose. You have
Right.
to,
Right.
You have to give it to everyone or
So,
no one.
Bob, wouldn't, because, let's face it, if we did a mailing, I think a mailing is a very good idea. But we can miss on things, you know, we're vulnerable to missing, but wouldn't we kind of be covered by putting it into our weekly newspaper and say we put it out there to everybody? And the weekly paper would cover that, so there wouldn't be any bias?
Well, that and the website and posting, but all the things that you've talked about are all the prudent way to get the word out.
Okay.
With respect to, excuse me, with respect to the weekly paper, you know, the question for the committee to consider and make a recommendation to the board is, you know, how long is that publication going to be? Is it going to be a one and done? That wouldn't seem to make a lot of sense. Is it going to be every week? Is it going to be, okay, we're going to do this for the next 8 weeks? See if you can negotiate a discount with the paper because you're going to do it for 8 weeks. I mean, what is the best bang for the buck? I don't think one and done makes a lot of sense because people are on vacation or people may be dealing with reopening and not worrying about reading the local paper.
Differently, I would.
The other question is, do you do an article? You know, do you do a front page or page 3, page 5, or back page? You know, after the board passes this, with the executive director or the chair or one of you guys as members of the committee, you know, doing, essentially writing the article for the reporter or answering some reporter's questions and getting it in the weekly paper that way. You know, that might be a better headline grabber than just, you know, something in the legal notice section which no one really reads anyway.
I think that's a great idea, Bob, and again, Connor, I can reach out, I know the reporter at the Walker Valley Times, and the Times-Star-Record reporter just called me this morning after returning her call. I could ask her about that to get it into Times-Star-Record if everybody wants. As far as an article is concerned, not an advertisement, an article.
Sure.
And I'll direct it to you.
Right.
And then, open it up.
Yeah, and I would also consider the idea of working with acquisitions. They do the work
Yeah.
where they could do strategic marketing campaigns for search engines and social media, which is probably highly effective in a town area, right? I mean,
We can access pretty much anyone who's online, whether 99% of people are either on search engine or social. We can tell you where they are, how many people are online. If there's 41,000 in town Montgomery, but you just want to get the business orders, I can show you how to do that. We can target people as frequent as you want. We can be very specific.
I think that's a great idea. I know that your following has grown quite a bit.
Yeah,
And that's a good thing,
We
so.
have the collective audiences of a lot of different pages too, so we can utilize that.
Yeah.
As an organic reach.
Good.
I think that's a great idea.
so we can use social media, we can do the paper, we can post literal physical copies in village centers. We can also work with the local marketing firm acquisitions to directly target the people who could be eligible for these grants to make sure they have the information. And on top of that, we could order of press contacts to get this program out.
Covering pretty much all the bases.
Right.
Yeah. So everything really depends on approvals for Tuesday's
From our
meeting.
board.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Pretty much it.
Looks pretty good though.
Yeah.
Good job.
That's-
I would just throw this out there. Once we get the approvals from this, our IDA board, we gotta kind of move on this.
Sure we do.
Out to everybody. Billy, after that meeting, I'd probably like to have a little chat with you about, the acquisitions end of it.
Of course.
All right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we're good. I'm not sure we need another meeting.
I think we got it.
Yeah, I think Tuesday's it.
Anything to add, Bob?
No, if you could just send me the final form of everything so that
Sure.
I can include it as exhibits to the resolution. And
Definitely.
then I'll try and finish the initial draft of the resolution now. Well, if not today, certainly before 12 tomorrow. And Connor, I'll send it to you, and you should probably, I would recommend circulating it to the members of this subcommittee to review and approve before it goes on to the other to the full board on Tuesday.
Sure. Absolutely.
And then I think one of the members of this committee should, on Tuesday during the meeting, report on the actions of the committee and the recommendations and the rationale for the recommendations. So I leave that to whoever wants to volunteer. But
I'll volunteer, Don.
But I think that's.
We
I
give
think
the Bob
that's-
All right.
Good idea.
That sounds like it's unanimous.
Yeah.
But it's a good recommendation. It's a good way to demonstrate to the town and also, frankly, to the ABO, since it'll be on the website, that you're taking advantage and utilizing the committee structure in creating a new program.
Sounds
I feel good.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
All right, guys. Stay safe.
All right, Bob.
Bye.
Take care.